Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to tonight's City Council study session. Time 6 o'clock. We're going to get started. I just wanted to go over a few items. So our agenda is as follows. We'll have a presentation from the oil and gas industry. We'll have, which will be 30 minutes. We'll have a presentation by the concerned citizens opposing oil and gas, which will be 30 minutes. And then we're going to have Department of Public Health and Environment come up and talk to the council. It's important that you all realize tonight is a study session. So with that said, we don't have any citizen communication tonight. That'll be at our regular meetings on the first and third Mondays of the month. We're here to listen and learn tonight, and that's important because this is where the council is going to get information regarding both sides of this issue, as well as our residents that are watching at home on Channel 8. So there will be no formal action taken by the council tonight. We cannot take formal action in a study session format. We've invited the two groups to speak this evening, and we also had Public Health and Environment scheduled for another night, and we thought tonight would be a good night to hear from them after the two opposing sides give us their comments. So with that said, I need to ask everybody to please be respectful of both opinions. Hold your applause so that everybody can hear what's being said. And I would ask the council to hold any questions until the end of each presentation. Let me see, there was another piece here. I don't want the council to look at this or the audience as an opportunity for debate. This is a learning, informational opportunity that we have set up for both the industry and the anti-industry folks to come and talk to us to give us some insight. So with that said, we'll get started. I want to invite the representative for the oil and gas industry that will be starting the speaking. Try to keep to your 30 minutes because whatever you guys have is what the other group will have as well. Let us know who you are and who you represent, and we'll start your 30 minutes. And I've got staff who will keep track of the time.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. My name is Ryan Seastrom. I'm a Community Outreach Coordinator with the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, the trade association here in the state that represents about 300 companies here in Colorado. Before I get started, I would like to say I do have folders for each council member that contains a number of handouts related to information that I will be touching on tonight, and then also just some general information specifically regarding to Proposition 112. So again, for the record, Ryan Seastrom, Colorado Oil and Gas Association, 1800 Glenarm Place, Denver, 80202. Thank you again for letting us speak tonight. Tonight I'm going to be touching on Colorado's oil and gas regulatory environment. With me, I've brought our Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs, Christy Woodward, who will be also be giving a part of this presentation. And then directly following Koga's presentation will be Chris McGowan from Colorado Petroleum Council, or the local branch of the American Petroleum Institute. So a little bit about Koga. As I mentioned, we are a nationally recognized trade association. We were founded in Colorado in 1984. We represent approximately 300 companies here in the state of Colorado from all areas of oil and gas, basically representing the entire value chain. We provide a unified voice on behalf of the industry, and we try to work with every level of government here in the state to help ensure a stable regulatory environment for our members and therefore our industry. So today's talk, I'm going to be giving a brief economic snapshot of the oil and gas industry here in the state, discuss a little bit about the regulatory environment and numerous rulemakings that the oil and gas industry has come upon, some misperceptions, and then, as I mentioned, API will speak, and then we'll open it up for question and answers. So economic impact in Colorado, granted these numbers are from 2015, but they still ring very true today. The University of Colorado is currently working on a study that will have more updated numbers. About 102,000 direct and indirect jobs here in the state, about $31.7 billion in economic output. Some numbers you don't see on here, in the past 2 years from ad valorem oil and gas taxes, we've provided K through 12 with about $700 million in funding. We are 5th in natural gas production and 7th in oil production nationally. So as you can see, the oil and gas industry is not, it's not a minor part of our state, nor our workforce. This is a brief snapshot of Adams County and economic numbers from the 7 metro counties. Even though only 3% of active wells are in Adams County in the metro county area, about 45% of all oil and gas jobs are located within this 7 metro county area. So we do live here, we do work here, and we do care about the communities that we do work in. So to touch briefly on some federal regulations, I am proud to say that the oil and gas industry here in Colorado is the most highly regulated in the nation. Our regulatory environment does lead, and other states do follow our regulatory lead. Some federal regulations that the industry adheres to: Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, National Environmental Policy Act, Resources Conservation and Recovery Act, Endangered Species Act, Occupational Safety and Health Act, and much more. And more importantly to note, no matter what happens on the national level, Colorado operators still have to follow Colorado state law and the regulatory environment that is here. So then to jump to the state level, we are an active stakeholder in various regulatory agencies, Department of Natural Resource agencies, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, or the COGCC, Colorado State Land Board, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and then also CDPHE agencies, Air Pollution Control Division, Water Quality Control Division, Hazardous Waste, and Waste Management Division. So we sort of serve as a liaison between operators, our membership, and these agencies. We're able to give the state sort of an on-the-ground view and perspective of what is actually happening in the field to the regulators who end up making the rules and laws for our agency. Now to touch on some statewide regulations. So there is a hydraulic fracturing disclosure, and I'll get to that slide later in my presentation. There is groundwater monitoring. Oil and gas operators are required to do groundwater sampling before and after they drill. Setbacks and mitigation. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the setback laws here in Colorado. Spill reporting. We do have to report spills. Air emissions. We do have to get permits to flare. Other air emissions. There was the governor's task force rulemaking, which ended up putting together a lot of the regulatory framework that operators here in the state have to adhere by. The flow line rules, those are recent from last year in response to the Firestone tragedy. Those are very new, those are very comprehensive, and I think they're going to benefit the state decades down the road. And then sort of on the more minute, there's noise regulations, stormwater regulations, and other ones like that, and regulations that cities can also be a part of in their land use. So to touch on the hydraulic fracturing disclosure rulemaking, this happened in 2011. It requires a comprehensive public disclosure of the chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing. You can actually go online and look this up, but it requires operators to provide the COGCC with 48 hours notice before hydraulically fracturing a well, and they must file their chemical registry within 60 days of completing a treatment. So there's a website, it's called fracfocus.org. You can actually look at the chemical composure of a well and what the makeup of the fluid is that was used to hydraulically fracture it. Now, it may not give the exact, I would say probably, the amount of ingredient. It's kind of like Coke and Pepsi. They both are sort of the same, but they're both secret. So, but the chemicals that we use are disclosed on this website. Some sort of examples, whereas you might hear muriatic acid, it acts as a diluted acid. It's actually found in swimming pools. Polycrylamide polycromolide, It's a friction reducer. It's used commonly in water and soil treatment. So many of the chemicals that are found in hydraulic fracturing fluid can actually be found in everyday life, household products, things that we are near and close to every day. So as I mentioned earlier, operators here do conduct baseline water quality samples. This rule was passed in 2013. It is a statewide mandatory groundwater sampling program. The initial sampling must be conducted with 12 months prior to setting the conductor casing, and then subsequent samples are taken between 6 and 12 months after sampling. So we have a good idea of what is in the water before we drill and then after we drill. Setback rulemaking. So this is one that this happened in 2013. This set the common setback distances that we are probably all mostly familiar with today. 500 feet from occupied structures, and then 1,000 feet from high occupancy buildings, such as schools, hospitals, other items like that. Currently within the COGCC, there is a petition that has been filed by LOGIC. That's an acronym for the League of Oil and Gas Impacted Coloradans, that is looking to increase that 1,000-foot setback instead of from the nearest corner of the building to the edge of the property. So that is currently being heard by the COGCC. Spills and release rulemaking, again in 2013. It was passed in 2014. They updated their spill reporting requirements. A spill is defined as any observable release of EMP fluids or produced fluids spilling on site, whether it's crude oil, salty water treatment fluids, or diesel fuel. So a spill is constituted as a spill or release in which one or more barrel of EMP waste outside containment, or a spill exceeding 5 barrels. And all of these do have to be reported on a Form 19 to the COGCC. Depending on the size of the spill, there has to be a direct report to the director of the COGCC as well. And as we get to air quality, I'm going to turn to my colleague, Christy Woodward, Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs.
Thank you. As Ryan mentioned, my name is Christy Woodward. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Colorado with a master's degree in environmental engineering from the Colorado School of Mines. I've been working to protect the environment for over 20 years, and I'm currently serving as a Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs for COGA. I don't necessarily have a fear of public speaking, but I will let you know that talking into microphones is a phobia. So if I stutter, you'll know. Shifting over to air quality, and I will try to be brief. In February of 2014, Colorado's Air Quality Control Commission voted to adopt new rules targeting air emissions and improving air quality. These regulations added controls and strategies to reduce fugitive volatile organic compounds and hydrocarbon emissions, including methane, although that was not the intent. The same practices employed for that also can capture methane. These rules require the installation of emission control devices and the implementation of leak detection and repair, which I will get into here on my next slide. At the time of this rulemaking, CDPHE estimated that these regulations would reduce VOC emissions by approximately 93,500 tons per year and reduce, again, methane and ethane emissions by 65,000 tons per year. The key elements of the air quality regulations included, as I mentioned, leak detection and repair, LDAR. They also required controls for storage tanks and expanded the applicability to pneumatic devices, which are common at oil and gas sites, but will allow for pressure release and emit small amounts of emissions. These BMPs required for well maintenance as well were added to minimize emissions, and there was comprehensive record keeping and recording requirements. As I mentioned, at LDAR reporting, operators are required to submit reports to the Air Pollution Control Division by May 31st of each year. This is to be transparent in all of the work that we're doing on a daily basis to reduce emissions in the state of Colorado. These reports include the number of facilities inspected, number of inspections, number of leaks identified, number of leaks repaired, and leaks that are put on a delay of repair due to lack of equipment or other various operating reasons. These inspections I will mention are done with an OGI camera or an optical gas imaging camera. It's very important that people using those cameras are well trained. And when we see videos, it's important to understand that often things like steam off of tanks, heat can be detected by these emissions as well, and so, or by these cameras. And so it's important that an operator using those cameras really fully understand what it is that they're looking at and ensure that it's an actual emission and not just heat. As I mentioned, a summary of our monitoring activities. All companies have provided this information, and you can see here from Table 2 that the leaks identified and repaired in 2017 were 17,254. While that number might seem high, I think it's important to know that there are a large number of components, and that actually only contributes to about a 3% leak rate, which is going down significantly as we continue reporting each year. I've worked on LDAR programs in the state of Wyoming for the last 10 years, and the most important thing to note is that when you first start a program, you'll wind up with higher leaks, and as the program advances and grows, your leaks reduce significantly. So they're wonderful programs and things that are being implemented and provided to the state for transparent reasons. As you can see from 2015 to 2017, there's almost a 54% reduction in leaks found, and we anticipate that trend will continue in the coming years. We also had a flow line rulemaking in 2018 that Ryan alluded to. The COGCC unanimously approved dozens of new regulations at this time. It increased the transparency and safety in gas leak reporting. It also bolstered the state's 811 Call Before You Dig program. It also, operators now have to register off-location flow lines with GPS endpoints and other location data, which can be made available through the COGCC to local communities so that you will know where oil and gas pipelines are located in your communities. It also improved the integrity management and testing requirements. I wanted to cover just a couple of misperceptions. One is that drilling and hydraulic fracturing uses a significant amount of Colorado's water. We hear this often, but in fact, it winds up only being about 0.09% of the water used in the state of Colorado. So equivalent to what is used for wildlife, but significantly less water that is drawn and diverted annually for things like recreation, minimizing stream flow, and other large industrial practices. Another misperception is that hydraulic fracturing injects fluids into fresh water. I brought a prop for this in that I have a couple sets of casing. Steel casing is installed underground in multiple layers to protect fresh water from coming into contact with produced hydrocarbon fluids. And what they do is they put a surface casing in the ground well below the water table, fill that with cement, and then put in a conductor casing, which again is filled with cement. So as you'll see here, I have two steel pipes. Essentially what would happen is there would be a third, would be a surface casing, and then there's volumes of cement poured in between all the way down, adding a triple layer of groundwater protection. I'm happy to answer any questions about that after this if you have any. That's all I've got.
Perfect. Thing I was about to ask you, I didn't want to run over. You'll just cut us off if we run over.
There's about 14 minutes left, Mayor Ford.
Feel free to just shut me right off. Good evening, council members. My name is Chris McGowan. I am the Associate Director at the Colorado Petroleum Council. We're a division of the American Petroleum Institute, and I want to start my time tonight by thanking each of you, both for your public service. I know that this often can be a very difficult, tiring, sometimes thankless job, and I just want to say thank you for your public service, and also for the time you spend, letting us all talk to you tonight. It's a very important thing that we all get a chance to come before you and talk about this, everyone in this room. And so we appreciate your willingness to have a dialogue with us this evening. So just want to start with thanking you. As I noted, Colorado Petroleum Council, we're a division of API. The American Petroleum Institute began and is still primarily a safety and advocacy organization. So to start off, to kind of explain what we do, you'll notice that there's a lot of references to API standards throughout Colorado's oil and gas rules. That's because API has been the trade association that sets those standards. They delve into engineering and technological standards and all those sorts of things. So we have a heavy role in that sort of aspect of oil and gas, and I want to make that very clear what our organization does. We also are an advocacy organization that represents all facets of the oil and gas industry, upstream, downstream, midstream, all of it. So we represent a wide pool of both oil and gas workers, operators, companies, pipeline transportation companies, all of it. So we're a very, very diverse group of folks, and we promote, as you see, promote safety and the responsible development of energy resources across the United States. So I want to keep it pretty focused tonight. I'm here to talk about oil and gas development in Commerce City, right? And I want to start off by talking about by the way, can you guys all hear me? I'm pretty giant, and I don't always get in these microphones because they're not built for folks my size. So if you can't hear me, just yell. I've often told I've been loud, so you can tell me that too. It's no problem. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about oil and gas in Commerce City, right? Sometimes we think about oil and gas as a outside impact, but not in our daily lives. I will give all credit to one of the county commissioners in Adams County. I don't know if he wants his name mentioned, but he put a very, very good perspective, right? You don't think about the federal government every day, you don't think about the state government every day, but you do think about your local government every single day. That's kind of paraphrased, but you guys are actively involved in the everyday activities of your constituents here in Commerce City, and oil and gas plays a huge role in that, a huge role in that. For example, you have quite a few people here in Commerce City that work in the energy industry. As you can see, about 27,111 people are involved in your workforce. A significant portion of those are involved in the oil and gas industry. According to the University of Colorado, as mentioned before, 79% of the jobs are located in this energy corridor. The average wage in Adams County, which is where we're sitting, is $72,603. That's pretty important. It's pretty important on a local level and to the Commerce City community. So we want to highlight, I went through a list of all of your tax-paying businesses that are located here in Commerce City. And it's a very interesting read because a significant portion of them are in one way involved in the oil and gas industry. That includes upstream, downstream, and end users, right? Everyday products, everything from commerce to transportation and manufacturing, all big industries in Commerce City. Energy industry also is a big driver of the economic realities here in Commerce City. So I just want to note to you first that it's right here in your city. Oil and gas is providing a huge, huge benefit. Also, I noticed in your budget, you guys are projected to get about $3 million from franchise fees, and a portion of that is sale of gas and electricity. That's also directly related to the oil and gas industry. Again, the Commerce City budget benefits from our industry and the revenues that we're generating. I think that's also important because those things pay for needed local services that your constituents rely on and that you are happy to provide them. And finally, your own budget does acknowledge that oil and gas is providing to the state's economic growth. I think it acknowledges that the industry has been an economic driver here in Commerce City and statewide for a long time, and we hope to continue doing so. I also want to focus on some health and safety items. I want to start by saying on your own website, you have several fact sheets, several fact questionnaires, as it were, and studies and things from the Department of Health. And they all show the same thing. Oil and gas poses no risk. It is a completely safe, environmentally responsible development that we continue to do in the best way and utilizing innovative and best management practices to keep it safe and to keep it efficient, right? It's listed right on your website. And you also have robust oil and gas rules that you've not very recently redid, actually. And one of the things I want to highlight tonight is that you have an extraction agreement, right? Your rules provide that each operator will individually negotiate with the city starting from a template the city already has. And your staff was very helpful, and we understand it's a template. We neither endorse nor support any of those provisions. That's not our business. That's between the city and its own individual operators. But that's what we want to emphasize. You have a tool in place for each of you with questions or concerns to utilize, right? And any individual operator is happy to meet with you and answer any questions you may have, right? They put together the development plans, and during those negotiations, as is mandated by your rules, you guys go into negotiations about that extraction agreement. They're there to answer questions, and you guys can negotiate that document that's a contract between the operator and the city to help guide the development within the city. So you have very, very good tools at your disposal to ensure that development and the citizens can coexist in a peaceful and happy way. And as you can see, the agreement, there was some thought put into it, right? You guys took some time and put some thought into your rules in 2012, and the same with your agreement, right? Your land development code adequately addresses the process for getting this contract and the permit to drill, which is required. And as you can see, the extraction agreement addresses things like location of wells, consolidating to make sure that there's not several wells, right? They're all consolidated in one area to minimize the impact, which is important, right? We want to make sure that they're centrally located when they site everything together. There's issues with water, noise, operations, all sorts of different things that can really help to address constituent concerns. Another thing I want to highlight is development within communities, right? There was a study done in Weld County, which is kind of close by you guys. I know you all, and ladies, I know where you all know where Weld County is. And from 2012 to 2015, there was roughly a 12 times increase in oil production and 3 times increase in gas production. Okay, it was pretty significant. And there was a pretty significant population boom at the time. The economy was good, oil and gas was a big driver of that. A lot of people moved in all together at once. So Energy in Depth conducted a study of available state data, CDPHE data. They reviewed all of it that was available and found that while there was tremendous growth in the industry, tremendous growth in drilling and development, there was no incidents that reported. In some cases, those incidents went down, including cancer, respiratory illness, and heart disease. That also includes there was a significant rise in the elderly population, which can often be infected. As you're older, right, you're more sensitive to these type of things. I'm finding that out as I get older. I'm no longer invincible, right? And so I think it's important to highlight this study because it shows that very, very easily development and populations can coexist and do it in a very peaceful manner, in a very good manner. And it's worked up there for a very long time, and we believe it can work anywhere. And I think it was just important to show you that study, and we can have copies printed out for each of you. I'm happy to pass it along if you'd like to read it. But more or less, I just wanted to summarize for you that, in fact, the ancillary effects that have been purported to exist just don't exist. Finally, we talk a little bit about the strictest regulations in the country, but we want to quantify that for you. Our organization undertook an analysis of the several other leading producing states. That included California, that included Oklahoma, that included Texas, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Alaska. We looked at several significant producing states and compared our regulations to theirs. And what we found is that Colorado exceeds in almost every single area, and in some areas is tied in all of those regulations. A couple that I'd like to point out for you is Christy did a great job going over the rare air rules, but as readily acknowledged, we were the first in the country to do that. The very first. We led the way. Now the federal government and several other states are looking to follow behind us, right? That includes the extensive flow line rulemaking. There is recent mapping of all of the abandoned lines in Colorado. Green completions is required in Colorado, but nowhere else. Setbacks, we have a higher setback here. The water testing is unique to Colorado, and it is only met by one other state that we could find, and even then their regulation isn't extensive as Colorado, including the pre- and post-baseline testing. And finally, local government consultation is not required anywhere else that we found, at least not at a state level, and at least not to the extent that we have here in Colorado. And we think that's important. And that's why we're here today. We're here to talk to you about the issues arising from oil and gas. And finally, I want to make myself available to you as well. I'm happy to give each of you my cell phone, my business card, my email. Reach out to us at any time. We're happy to speak at any town halls, community meetings, constituent meetings. We'll answer questions. We're here to do whatever it takes because we believe that reaching out to your constituents is an important piece of oil and gas development, and that's my role at the Petroleum Council, is to work with local governments like yourself and your constituents because that's what we're all here for. So I believe I'm running pretty close. I tell you what, I'd like to leave the last 4 minutes for questions, if that's okay to everyone. I think that'd be perfect. So we won't take up any more of your time, and please let me know if you have any questions at the end. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I want to thank all three speakers that got up for the industry. Does the council have any questions of the industry at this time? No, I don't have a light one. Raise your hand. All right, Mr. Hughesman.
Thank you. Actually, Ryan. So overall, I have to say I'm really underwhelmed by your presentation. I'm sorry to tell you that. I was really hoping whenever you guys came here that you would actually address the concerns of our residents and that you would talk specifically to the well pads that are being proposed, that you would talk specifically to the operations that you wanted to have conducted in the city. But you're not the operators doing this. You're a trade association whose sole mission is to represent the best interests of the industry over individual companies and basins. So you're here and you're presenting on behalf of the industry, but you've done nothing to answer the questions of the people that want to know how this is going to affect their home. We've talked about safety records and we've talked about testing that takes place, but in every instance we can find instances where those didn't take place or violations occurred. Most recently, extraction in their field up in Erie that had violations that the state had to be called in on. So my question basically is, why are we not getting the information that the residents deserve over what is being proposed, where it's being proposed, and how it's going to affect their lives?
Hi, Councilmember. Thank you for your question.
No, stop. Stop. He asked no thing. No. Stop. Thank you.
So as you did mention, COGA, we are a state trade association. We represent our members as a whole. We do not speak for individual companies. We aren't involved in individual company permits. We aren't involved in any conversations they might be having with cities, counties, municipalities, health officials, anything like that. So for me to come up to the podium and speak on items that personally I have no knowledge of would be improper.
So to follow up on that, where is extraction? Where is Great Western? Where are these companies that want to operate on our city? Why were they not here on a night when we are trying to learn about what is going to happen in our city? Why weren't those companies invited to come here and speak out and have the opportunity to address the residents that have come forward with their concerns?
Councilmember, you would have to ask them individually.
Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, I have concerns myself. I thought we were going to go over what's been proposed coming into the city, and that we've had serious discussions with the citizens just behind you there that have come up with a map that indicates where drilling could occur. And that's what I thought we were here tonight to speak about. The health concerns, and the gentleman just got up and said, but the health concerns or risks have gone down. They have not. We have incidents up in Broomfield, Lafayette, Erie, people with a significant amount of benzene being shown in the blood. There's a video out there of a child that continuous nosebleeds. And these are huge well pads that are coming in. And I would thought here you would be addressing those concerns. I mean, they're going in areas where we're heavily populated, and our growth rate right now is two families of four moving in every day, and that's significant. I know a few weeks we're going to talk about water issues, but tonight we're talking about the industry. And you represent the industry, and you have folks from the industry as well attending here so they can hear from that. But you did not bring that as far as your presentation, and I just don't understand why, having this discussion, that you would come to the table well prepared.
Thank you, Councilmember. I apologize if you don't think that we're well prepared. To speak on anything such as benzene exposure, items like that, I would leave that to the CDPHE, as they would be the best equipped agency and individuals to address those concerns. So I would suggest that when the gentleman gets up later, maybe you pose that question to him. In the packet that I handed all of council, you will find a fact sheet that has been put together by the CDPHE. It's recent. I believe it was done within the last several months, specifically in regards to the incident that you mentioned, or the issue that this concerned parent brought up about her child. So I would encourage you to look at that fact sheet, but again, if you do have any other questions, I would prefer you direct those to CDPHE, as they would be best equipped to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Before I come back to you, Ben, is there anyone else? Steve.
This question is for the mines graduate. I apologize, I forgot your name. Christy? Christy. I wrote my notes and I wrote down, did you say hydraulic injections into fresh water? There aren't any history of accidents with that here in the state of Colorado?
I can't speak to that specifically for the state of Colorado, but not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, I know there are extensive studies on a national basis, and the EPA has put out a report indicating that there aren't any major concerns with hydraulic fracturing, and I'd be happy to provide that as a reference if you need it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
All right, any others before I go back to Benjamin? Oscar?
Yeah, I just want to know who performed this health study in Weld County that you alluded to on the slide here.
Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't grab your question. I apologize. I was going to grab them, but go ahead, please. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I just want to know who performed the study in Weld County for the health effects and
Energy in depth, and I will send that to you as soon as I leave here tonight. I'll send you the full study, and I can email it to all the members of the council together so they can see who put it together. Would that be okay with you?
is that someone from the industry or?
Yeah. We're in the industry. And it's nonpartisan data. It uses all available CDPHA data. I think that's the key point, right? It's analyzing data that was done by the state agency. We didn't put the data together. We didn't do any of the air monitoring. We didn't take any of the samples. All we did was we analyzed available data that was done by the state. And so I think that's an important distinction, whereas we're not going out sampling and tell you this is what we found. We found the stuff that was publicly disclosed. Anyone can go look at it and backfill and review it. It's all state data. It's all publicly reported. It's all stuff that was done, third-party neutral source. We just looked at it and analyzed available sources, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
You bet. And I kind of want to just make an offer to Councilman Douglas and Councilman Hussman. I didn't have any specific concerns, but I do want to make my offer clear. I'm happy to, if we can communicate and do it in a public manner is fine. If you have specific concerns and there are specific things written down, I will send you an email. Feel free to let me know. I just didn't know what those specific concerns were, and I'm happy to address them. We have information available. We have all manner of tools available at our disposal, and I'm happy to do so in the future if you'd like. I just want to make that offer available to you as well.
I just, if you have the numbers of how many actually residents from Karma City work in this industry?
So ours is based on county. Ours is county by county. So it's the School of Lee School of Business up in Colorado did it at county by county. We are currently looking to develop more local citywide numbers. I'm looking into that. The data is just not available at this time because it's based within county, county by county. There's 64 counties, so they started there, and then we're trying to extrapolate from that. And I'm working on direct Commerce City numbers, and as soon as I get those, I will follow up with you to the extent I can.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? I'll go back to you, Mr. Huseman, then you, Steve.
So, looking at the Frac Focus website that you pointed out to us, I look on here as someone who has put a lot of pipe in his career. Corrosion inhibitor in pipe, I see that acetaldehyde, sorry for the chemists out there that can pronounce that better, is used to prevent the corrosion of pipe. Research on that chemical says that it is a type 1 carcinogen in humans, and it has the potential to alter DNA. So why is that chemical being injected into the ground?
I think that's a broad assumption, council member. I think we're assigning one thing to every piece of development. I can't speak to individual development because I don't know what development you're referring to. I think the key thing is that we're looking at a generalized disclosure. I think we'd have to ask site by site what's being used, those sorts of things. Whether it is or not, I think we get these lists of all these chemicals that are allegedly used in hydraulic fracturing fluid. And then oftentimes the reality is not every single one is used, and certainly not in the immense amounts that it's been purported to. So I think on each individual, and I would go back to those individual negotiations with each operator, that when development is proposed, and you can say, look, what are we going to be doing at these different steps? and you can readily get more of that information.
Sure, but I'm not looking at just an arbitrary list of chemicals. I'm looking at the list that came off the Frac Focus website that tells me that that's one that's being used. And unfortunately, Extraction, Great Western, and the other companies are not here in order to tell us whether or not they're using them in Commerce City.
And we're happy to look into that for you. Again, I'll reiterate my offer. I'm happy to answer those specific questions, and I will follow up with you on that. I can't speak to their individual development because I haven't spoken about it with them. I think it's a valid concern, and I know that each individual operator would be happy to sit down and discuss what's being used in each individual piece of their development. There's also, as mentioned before, proprietary concerns, right? It's a trade secret issue, it's a legal issue that they can't fully disclose. But again, we're looking at a list that's disclosed. That's not my slide. I have no idea where that slide came from. I know that you have to look on each individual. The Frac Focus website is for each individual development. So if you're looking off one that came off Frac Focus, I just don't know where it came from. It could be in any development anywhere. That's a generalized slide. I think the key is for each individual development. I think your concerns are within Commerce City. I would suggest that when those operators come in, you can say, look, is this going to be a part of your plans? And I'm sure they would be happy to address it.
Mr. Douglas.
Yes, I had a question for Christie. Thank you. You said that there hasn't been any impact from drilling into groundwater, and there's been several instances of Weld County that leaked into wells where folks could turn on their water, and because of the methane that was exposed into the water, they could light their water on fire. I mean, this started way back in 2008, 9, with the movie Gasland, to get one around the country, and for you to say that there's no when it comes to water and methane, there hasn't been any leaks. You really need to state the facts because that's not true.
I think you would need to look at the specific incidences, and I'm not familiar with those incidences, but I would add that methane is a naturally occurring chemical in the environment. It's naturally occurring in most of our subsurface environments, and you can do isotopic analysis to determine whether that came from interface with a well or a pipeline versus just being naturally occurring. And so I can't speak to those particular instances as to whether or not that study was done, but I'm not familiar with them.
Okay, well, this is just from drilling. This is not just natural methane that's in the ground, because there is natural methane. There's pockets all over, and then of course we have the well that were severed up at Firestone, that blew up. So when it comes to water, this is actually from drilling that caused the leak into drinking water.
I'm not familiar with those cases. This is the first I've heard of it.
Okay, I would think that the understanding what's on the table here as far as educating the public, and you've been in the industry, you would have that history bringing forward to make sure that, just for what it is, it's facts, and that fact that did occur. And since that incident, we're trying to make sure, for the industry, trying to make sure there's no reoccurring incidents. I would rather hear that than say, well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about how we prevent that from happening in the future, and that modern wells, as I mentioned, have casing and cement. They often also monitor pressure to ensure continuously that they don't lose pressure and have any interface. And if they do, they can shut those in, mitigate the situation, and move forward. And if it's not mitigatable, they'll close the well.
Okay. And also know the ones that are capped to, eventually they leak over time. So they're not completely 100%, or once you seal those, they're not going to leak.
I'm not familiar with that as an instance either. It's my understanding that modern plug and abandon practices will close a well permanently with, lots and lots of cement.
I would think that you would, after this meeting, go look that up because it is stated cases.
I'm happy to do that and provide you any additional information. And if you'd like to meet and talk about it, I'm happy to take a look at that for you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
No problem.
Is there any other questions? Jose?
This is actually for staff. Could we get those meetings with those companies? I mean, this is a broad overview of what our residents were asking for, but I think could we get in contact with those companies and bring them to the table? I think that would help us a lot more.
It is my understanding, and I will look at staff, that offer has been made on certain circumstances, and those have been declined over the last several months. Chris, I think that's correct. That would have to occur in a public meeting, of course, Those are meetings that are currently occurring with staff pursuant to council direction on COGCC applications. There are no city applications pending. The purpose of the meeting tonight was a follow-on on the discussion of a moratorium in May and not particularly directed at individual applications or specific activity. That was not the takeaway from that meeting when it was set back in May. And so that, I think, does that accurately summarize?
The context for the original scheduling of this is, I think, the key. We provided a forum for both NRCC and the industry to formulate this however they chose. And I think from what I understand and hearing from them, because the original context of this way back when was the moratorium, I think there was a focus on their part to focus on the more global issues.
Right, right. And I think it was great information and it's good overview. But I think what we're asking, I guess, now is to have meetings and open to the public for those companies to come forward that are going to be drilling in Commerce City.
I think it's a fair point. We'll absolutely pass that request along to any specific companies looking at activity within our community.
Councilwoman Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. So I realize there's frustration in this room because I think there was a expectation as far as getting the information that was pertinent to what is activities are in our community, and I understand that. And I think what makes it difficult for us sitting up here is that we have been provided the information from the industry, and we also get the information from the community, and so it makes it difficult to make a sound decision as far as what in moving forward. Without having that pertinent information, especially for our community, as far as, and I won't repeat what some of my colleagues have requested, but again, asking for these other parties' information and they're not available or the information is not available at this time, this was the perfect opportunity to bring all that information together and not taking side. I'm trying to be neutral to get all the information together and then we make a sound decision. And I'm just saying that this just makes our position here on council a little difficult because we are trying to do what's best for our community, but also be within the parameters of not getting ourselves in any hot water, so to speak. So along the lines that Councilmember Guardiola mentioned as far as getting those companies to the table, and that information that's been offered to us individually, I would like to see that offered to the community in a forum maybe such as this is again. And I know that's a big ask because it was difficult to get everybody here this evening to be able to present all that information. But in moving forward, I think just the information that I have gathered from my colleagues here and what has been on my mind this evening, I think that it's worth a conversation to bring that forward again with all parties involved.
Mr. Huseman.
I just want to follow up by saying I appreciate the offer to meet with the council members in order to discuss issues we have. But the problem is meeting with the council members does not address the concerns of the people that are sitting behind you. And those are the people that the meetings need to take place with, and those are the ones that you need to convince them that you're doing what's right by them. Because ultimately, my opinion is insignificant. What matters is what the community wants, and that is who I'm elected to represent. So trying to meet with me individually does little to change their opinions.
Go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember, I think that's a very fair and transparent and accurate statement. I will extend that offer to them as well. I'm happy to go into the community. We can set up anytime you like. I'm happy to answer their questions, their concerns. I can answer as much as I can. I'm always happy to meet with constituents or citizens. That's part of this job that I love. Because I agree with you. I think part of the most important outreach that we can do is with citizens that do have concerns. I certainly would not stand here today to dismiss their concerns or any of those sorts of things, and I will make that offer to them. I just can't turn around to them right now, but that offer stands. If they want to come as well, I'm not asking. I'm happy to make that offer and extend that to everyone if that's a little more clear to you. So just let us know. We're happy to show up.
Steve?
Thanks. I just want to add to staff, I know we had postponed this several times. This was supposed to have occurred back in July, then it got pushed to August, then it got pushed to September. And, that was an opportunity for those industries to be here, even the spokesperson for those industries, not from the state, but for these folks right here, they're concerned about their jobs. I just attended a Colorado Alliance for Climate Change on Saturday, and they talked about transitional jobs because of also fuel industry for our country is starting to change over. Xcel Energy was proposed, it was going to be a natural gas plant. Now they're going to shut that coal plant down, which generates 800 watts, and replace, it's going to be wind and solar generating, I believe it's 16 or 1800 watts of energy. So the industry is going through a transition here, and just want to make sure if that happens, the folks here, they're on the front line and that they're taken care of. So, thank you.
Is there any other questions for the industry from this council? Seeing none, thank you. I'd like to now turn it over to the residents, and they have a group and a representative that'll come up and get their half-hour presentation started. So if you would like to come up to the podium now and make your introduction, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Can you give me a minute? There was interruption here.
Thank you.
Go right ahead.
I'm Susan Noble, and I live in Reunion. We live in Reunion. Start, Chris. Thank you. Start. Mm-hmm. Toxic gases and volatile organic compounds that escape from oil and gas sites are invisible to the naked eye and silent. An Earthworks team using state-of-the-art infrared FLIR camera captured these emissions on August 23rd. We're nearby at the new extraction oil and gas drilling site that we all saw pop up in recent weeks across 470 at 132nd and Sable. 20 wells at this site. That's what the camera is capturing. Now multiply those emissions that you're seeing by the 11 proposed drilling pads surrounding some 20,000 Commerce City residents and consider the effect on the air we all breathe. It's no wonder that residents of Erie or Firestone or Windsor or Greeley suffer nosebleeds, headaches, asthma, lung problems, even cancers. And it's no wonder that health concerns caused the American Medical Association this year to divest from oil and gas, Bank of the West to quit funding oil and gas activity, and Xcel Energy and United Power to move towards renewable energy, towards our future. As we stay on this video, on behalf of all concerned citizens in the North Range, we thank you, councilors, for giving constituents who are concerned about our families, our air, our water, and the influx of oil and gas interest in our beautiful residential areas, the opportunity to begin a dialogue with you. Again, this was on August 23rd. The most consequential decisions you may ever face as a counselor are ahead of you. With you rests the fate of our health, safety, welfare, our property values, and our quality of life. The outcomes, including economic, will be forever and will be your legacy. When the bust comes, and it will, as it always has, who will be left to clean up the industrial wasteland? This map shows all of the applications to date. Extraction Oil and Gas, whose emissions you just saw, is applying for sparrow, condor, falcon, owl, redtail, blue jay, kestrel, and most recently hawk and oriole. Petro operating is Antelope, and Great Western Oil and Gas, Jacobson and Edmondson. Every one of these sites directs their horizontal fracking to our neighborhoods. Between them, they want to drill nearly 200 horizontally fracked wells under your many, many neighborhoods, under homes, under schools, in some cases pads only 150 feet away, as in Aberdeen at the Antelope pad. The completed sites would average over 5 football fields in size. That's one pad. Land removed from housing or commercial use and from meeting the needs of the coming Aerotropolis. Last month, the municipal director for Extraction Oil and Gas told a group of us gathered at a home in Buffalo Mesa that the owl pad, alone, which will have 16 wells, could take up to 6 months to complete, working 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, with thousands of truck trips required. Now multiply all that times 11 drilling pads. Before I introduce our speakers, we of North Range Concerned Citizens also want to let you know that the same extraction employee told us that the operator is working with city staff to build 2 new pipelines in our area. Your staff confirmed the discussions and described the proposed pipelines as best management practices. The latest state application from Extraction does not call out a single oil tank. That would be Hawk, Oriole, under Harlow, because Extraction believes they have a go signal here for new pipelines. We say, slow down. Our fundamental belief is that industrial uses are not compatible with densely populated residential areas. We're aware that you as our representatives have directed staff to mitigate impacts. We haven't seen evidence of mitigation measures that eliminate risks or impacts or the cumulative effect of megapads with a massive number of horizontally fracked wells in our neighborhoods. Remember that video. I'm now pleased to invite to the podium our esteemed speakers from the organization Be the Change. Weston Wilson, formerly of the EPA, was a member of the city's Oil and Gas Task Force when the city devised oil and gas regulations following the first incursion in 2011. Phil Doe, who was with the Bureau of Reclamation, also served on that same task force. After they present, we have 5 of your constituents will as well. Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, City Councilman. I too want to thank you for your public service. It's a difficult task that you have. You know, 7 years ago, back in 2011, Phil Doe, the next speaker, and I, we were here on a task force discussing new drilling, and at that time, 4 oil and gas wells were presented. Well, when we brought up the concept that many dozens of wells, perhaps hundreds of wells, may eventually be drilled in Commerce City, the industry representatives exploded with rage and contempt for such speculation. But now you find your community faced with several hundred new oil and gas wells. Each will take weeks to drill, hundreds of trucks, and so many wells on one pad, they amount to chemical factories within your midst. It is certain that these new wells will emit toxic organic compounds and benzene that will waft over your town. Additional risks include so-called frack hits. That's where a new well connects to an improperly abandoned oil well and fluids or gases come to the surface. In addition to that, you face risks of gas fire, sabotage, avalanche delay, light pollution, reduction in property value, loss of tax revenue, gas and oil and water pipeline leaks, and hazardous material vehicle accidents. Here in Commerce City, that added danger from explosions and major spills could also affect the city's water supply. Well, since Commerce City rules were adopted in 2012, science has advanced. Now, these companies plan to drill up to several hundred new wells horizontally below the city. When they drill, those horizontal wells are fracked, and they hit very high pressure underground, and ultimately, they release toxic gases. Extremely toxic benzene is released along with organic compounds that form harmful ozone. The volatile organic compounds from the industry, in fact, on the Front Range, represent 55% of the VOCs that are emitted here. The rest come from our cars and trucks. Air pollution from ground level ozone increases heart attacks and contributes to childhood asthma. Breathing ozone causes chest pain, coughing, throat irritation, and airway inflammation. It can also reduce lung function and harm tissue. Ozone can worsen bronchitis, emphysema, and asthma. Even though Adams County has ozone violations that exceed EPA's health standard, COGCC, by approving these new wells, will abuse its authority and add more toxic air emissions to your already unhealthy air. The lawsuit brought by our Children's Trust, known as the Martinez case, the case now that on appeal to the state Supreme Court, clearly obligates the state to protect public health and safety. But that's not what's happening. As Susan Noble showed you, that team from Earthworks in Durango came up here and recorded those VOC emissions with their FLIR camera. And I got news for you, Christy, it's not steam. What they're showing there is releases of toxic air emissions. Finding those emissions now on a current operation by extraction just helps show you how ubiquitous, how common it is for the industry to shower its neighbors with these harmful gases. Every oil and gas well has leaks. And when they transfer liquids, gases escape, perhaps at night when the FLIR cameras can't operate. Toxic cancer-causing benzene is released during oil and gas development. Dr. Lisa McKenzie of the Anschutz Medical Center is the principal author on 3 peer-reviewed papers showing that releasing benzene, what that does to citizens here. Now, unfortunately, Dr. McKenzie couldn't be here tonight. Perhaps she'll be able to present her findings at a later date to you. But just last month, an analysis by Dr. McKenzie and her colleagues found that benzene along the Front Range, benzene now in the air, can increase the risk of certain cancers. Here's what she found. For the benzene concentrations within 500 feet of an oil and gas well, she concluded they constitute a risk of 100 in a million additional cancers. And even out to a mile, the risk of cancer from benzene emissions from oil and gas drilling was still over 1 in 1 million, according to Dr. McKenzie. Now, EPA has set a benzene target of protecting most people so that they have an individual lifetime risk of less than 1 in a million. Well, Dr. McKenzie found more than that out at a mile. But according to the World Health According to the World Health Organization, there is no safe level of benzene. Prior to that, Dr. McKenzie's careful peer-reviewed science showed higher rates of birth defects and higher cancers for residents living near oil and gas wells. Now, shortly you'll hear from CDPHE, who will present, in their last slide, what I understand, something broad about the lack of risk of cancers from this industry. But their report that they did in July of this year on benzene concentrations in Erie have similar results They show cancer risks of greater than 1 in a million there. Now, despite that cancer risk, CDPHE concludes it should be accepted. Now, others will mention to you the industry brings risk of explosions, as you surely know. But be aware, too, that compressed gas in a pipeline through the city is a risk, and the City Council must respect and act to protect your citizens from those potential explosions. So despite Commerce City correctly and thoughtfully having voted to support the findings of Martinez, that this industry must operate to protect public health, the industry with the state's approval is running pell-mell to become your new neighbors. You can take action to delay these oil and gas wells. First, to give your staff time to catch up with this new science, and also to delay any new wells until the state Supreme Court rules on the Martinez case. Alternatively, you could use your own separate and supreme municipal authority to impose a moratorium, because the science shows that the industry and their constant toxic trespass wherever they operate in Colorado. Well, thank you. Phil Doe is our next speaker. He's the environmental director of Be the Change. Phil is a former employee of Bureau of Reclamation and also a whistleblower. He'll discuss some facts about water use related specifically to these wells, the industry's risky financial situation, and suggest how the City Council might proceed.
Thank you.
How do you do? I'm pleased to be here. My name is Phil Doe. As you've heard, I'm the environmental director for Be the Change. I was asked to speak on water, the economics of fracking, and what the future looks like with regard to fracking on the state level. I gave you about 15 pages of information that I hope will be useful to you as you deal with this issue, which I think is probably the most important issue you'll ever deal with. I'll skip around because there's no way I can get through all this. If you'll look on page 2, item 8, I'll just read from this. This gives you some background. Colorado uses about 15 million acre-feet of water annually. Most of that water, over 80%, is used for agriculture. Much of it to grow corn, which we then feed our cars. By comparison, Denver Water serves about 1/4 of the state's population, but accounts for only 2% of the state's annual water use. The fracking industry says they don't use much water. Well, on a macro terms, that may be true, but when you compare it to domestic water use, it's significant. If you'll turn to page 3, item 2, the industry claims their water use is insignificant when compared to the state's overall water use. This is marginally true on a macro basis, but is also a evasive claim, ignoring the industry's huge waste stream and the potential for groundwater contamination. Recent studies show that every gallon of oil produced, 10 gallons of liquid toxic waste is also produced. Indeed, the volume of toxic waste requiring disposal has increased in the United States by 1,400% in the last half-decade. About 196 new wells have been proposed in the immediate Commerce City area. About 10 million gallons per well. At 10 million gallons per well, that comes to an overall water demand of about 2 billion gallons. This demand will occur over several years, of course, but is still locally significant, particularly when the huge waste stream is accounted for. By comparison, South Adams Water and Sanitation District delivers about 2.7 billion gallons of water to Commerce City residents every year. Actually, the overall use by the oil and gas industry will exceed the city's annual use, almost doubling it, since when the fracking industry uses water, they destroy it for any other purpose. When citizens use water, more than 50% of it is returned to the hydrologic system for reuses after it is treated. Over 700 different chemicals have been used in fracking, according to EPA, but the flowback of the chemical brew the industry used to frack is further contaminated with nuclear material, heavy metals, and toxic organic compounds. Skipping down to 9, this is how ubiquitous spills and toxic material are in association with fracking. In a recent article in Denver Post, environmental reporter Bruce Finley wrote, oil and gas industry spills increased by 17% in 2017. Nearly a dozen mishaps per week. In 6 cases, hydrocarbons flowed directly into waterways, and in 22 incidents, domestic water wells were apparently contaminated. Companies reported 619 spills in 2017. Altogether, companies spill more than 93,000 gallons of oil into soil, groundwater, and streams. They also spill more than 506,000 gallons of toxic radioactive fluids from producing wells. The certainty of spills and groundwater contamination should be of urgent concern to the people and the government of Commerce City, since almost half of the city's water supply comes from shallow alluvial wells. I'm going to skip now to the economics of fracking. The question's been asked for years, if the industry isn't making any money, how can they continue to survive? Well, they still get a lot of money from Wall Street, they borrow a lot, and they're tremendously in debt. Skipping to the second paragraph, the 60 biggest exploration and production firms are not generating enough cash from their operations, and this is from the New York Times of last week, to cover their operating and capital expenses. In aggregate, from the mid-2012 to mid-2017, they had a negative cash flow of $9 billion per quarter. Going on, Amir Azhar, a fellow at Columbia University Center on Global Energy Policy, calculated the industry's net debt in 2015 was $200 billion, a 300% increase from 2005. The author goes on to explain how companies that rarely, if ever, show a profit can continue to find investors. For a long time, the public markets have been valuing fracking companies not based on a multiple of profits, the standard way of valuing a company, but rather according to a multiple of acreage the company owns. As long as companies are able to sell stock to the public or sell themselves to companies that are already public, everyone in the chain, from the private equity funders to the executives, continue to make money. It is all reminiscent of the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s, when internet companies were valued on the number of eyeballs they attracted, not on the profits they were likely to make. As long as investors were willing to believe that profits were coming in, it all worked, until it didn't. The person that wrote this is Bethan McLean, and she's written a book called Saudi America, The Truth About Fracking and How It's Changing the World. That book will be available this week. I think all of you will find it very interesting. Now I'm going to turn to my friend, Dr. Wendell Bradley. He's a retired physicist. He lives in the oil patch. And he's written several papers on fracking. This is, I've included as Exhibit 1. It was printed in Counterpunch, where I also write. And these are some of his findings. 1, bonding for operators is hopelessly inadequate, leaving the distinct possibility that the public will have to foot the bill for cleanup of accidents and the long-term maintenance. 2, wells deplete rapidly, so that in many cases the wells become stripper-like after only 18 months. And let me add here that in this state, though a lot of the revenue that's coming from severance tax, stripper wells do not pay a severance tax. And already in this state, because of the steep decline in production, 71% of the wells are stripper, and they're not paying any severance tax. Number 3, on average, oil would have to be almost $100 a barrel for an average well in the Wattenberg to break even. For natural gas, separation, and I think this is extremely important, separation, handling, and transport to the sales hub will typically combine to cost more than is reasonable by sale. So it's a losing proposition. The more you produce, the more you lose, is what it comes down to. And I'll skip to 6. Although benzene tops the list of toxic emissions as a primary health concern, no reliable COGCC data exists for assessing the routine exposure or concentrations. Now, let me turn briefly to the future. There are two things that we can all see, and one is the Martinez decision, which will be argued before the Supreme Court on October the 16th. We feel, and we've said for some time, that it is the law, because the appeals court told the state of Colorado and the COGCC what they were doing and what they'd argued before the court was not right. It was not in, it did not comport with the law itself, and it did not comport with the regulations they'd set forth. What the COGC argued was that they only had to protect public health 50% of the time. The rest of the time, they had to encourage oil and gas development. I've characterized that in writing as similar to a pediatrician administering to the health of young kids in the morning and selling cigarettes on playgrounds in the afternoon. You can't do both. You have to protect public health. The COGCC has ignored that. But my friend, an attorney in Boulder, Dan Leftwich, has written why this is the law. I won't go into the details here, but I would encourage you to read it. The second issue is what is called Ballot Proposition 112, NE Initiative 97. It calls for a setback of 2,500 feet. The oil and gas industry has already raised $21 million, I think, to fight it as of this date. Incredible, isn't it? It's in reaction to the fact that the state government has not taken the pleas of the public seriously. People don't go out and pass initiatives just because they have nothing else to do. I've run several of them. It's extremely hard work. So I know what they went through. They got 172,000 signatures. And according to original polling results, 60% of the people of the state favor the 2,500-foot setback. Let me say something about the 500-foot setback because so much is made of it.
Mr. Doe, sorry, may I just note there are 5 minutes remaining under the official timer?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just say that 500 feet has no validity, it has no scientific basis, and it isn't even 500 feet. Any landowner can ask for a variance and get it. So you can come up as close as 75 feet. Just know that. When you hear these things stated, there's a lot of information that isn't on the surface. And I hope that we provide you with some information that will help you dig into these issues because they are very important to your citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the speakers from the community.
Mr. Mayor,
residents.
I think they have additional speakers.
Oh, they do? I thought he just said there was 5 minutes. You got more? Okay, go ahead. We'll give you, what do they have left, 5 minutes? I just took up some time.
Shade over 4.
Yeah, a little over 4. Go ahead.
If possible, we would like to cut into our question and answer period. We have 4 residents who would like to speak tonight, and I hope that the information that they impart to you will be useful in your future decision-making as well.
Well, I'm not cutting into this guy's time right now, but that would be up to this council to allow, because we were trying to make sure we did this fairly. Both sides had the same amount of time. It's up to the council if you want to allow for additional time for the resident group to speak. So I'm asking. Mr. Douglas.
Yes, I'm asking if we could give them more time since they were prepared and they did have an agenda and they made sure that their speakers were here to address the council, and I think the council needs to hear from this side here. And I would have said the same thing about the industry too. If they were here needing more time, I would have done the same for them. So I'm asking if this discussion can continue so that our council is well informed of what's going on, because this is something that we need to make sure whatever decision we go forward, you have the best information you have with the folks currently here and not have to revisit this.
Right now, since this is a study session, we can't vote in here. I just need to know that there is the majority of the city council members are willing to allow additional time. So let me know if you want to allow additional time for the citizen group.
I got a question. How much more time? Because
Well,
I just think we have to be very fair.
That's part of this discussion. Mr. Hughesman?
You know, I want to hear what everybody has to say, but, you know, the citizens chose who they wanted to come speak. They chose to bring the people not living in our community in to speak before the residents. So I think that was poor timing on their part, and maybe they should have put their presentation together a little bit differently so we could hear from the residents and then their experts afterwards. So I'm willing to let them extinguish the rest of their time and then have a question and answer service, but I think that was on them to put the presentation together the way that they wanted to, and that was a foul on their part.
Anyone else on this side? Anyone else supportive of extra time for the group? Saying none, no, you'll be allowed the 4 minutes that you have remaining. Use that to your benefit. Right?
Okay. I'm Dr. Fei Yi. I live in Buffalo Run. Tonight I'm going to make 2 points. So first point, if I build a house just 100 feet away, 1,000 feet away from the refinery located by the 76, and I offer 10% less the price to our city council members, will you consider this as your favorable candidate if you're shopping for a new home? If I was asked this question, I would say no, sorry. Even you offer me free, I will not take it. In my mind, any fracking pads is equivalent to a chemical plants. They have chemicals, they have trucks coming and coming out. They have all those pollutants generated. So it's literally a chemical plants. And looking at this map, if all these pads is built, we are surrounded by hundreds of chemical plants. I don't think people will like to stay in this area if they want to stay here for a long time. Okay, the second point, economy we want to have is something sustainable, right? So even they build those pads and extract oil, how many years they can operate? I think common city people want something can last longer, last generations, right? So as major oil companies you can find on the Fortune 500 companies, they don't present them as oil company anymore, like Exxon Shell. They call themselves an energy company because they are now doing biofuel, renewable, everything else as alternative, not just oil. So I encourage my friends on this side to think about the change because fossil fuel will have a stop time. It is limited anyway. That's the 2 points I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any time left?
Yes, there's a little bit over 2 minutes.
Okay.
I've paused it during the interim.
My name is Lisa Goodmanson, and I live in the River Oaks neighborhood. I'm here to speak to the proximity of the Antelope, Jacobson wells and tanks that are proposed to be put right there in the middle of that field. I got most of my information from the response that the city provided to the COGCC, which addressed that 170 feet from proposed multifamily homes is where this is going to be located. Within 500 feet of the Antelope pad, there are more than 100 homes. There are going to be 24 wells there and 48 tanks immediately adjacent to residential areas. The Jacobson well, from what I can tell on the map, is off of 112th and Highway 2 near new homes being built, Pioneer Gravel, the new rec center, and the industrial area that's off of 112th and Highway 76. Both of these sites, the Jacobson and the Antelope, are surrounded by established residential areas. Turnberry, River Oaks, Bonnieville, and Turnberry Elementary School is within approximately 2,100 feet of those sites. There's a railroad track that runs along the proposed pads. There's a potential for fires if a train would throw a spark. What kind of situation would that put our homes in if something were to happen due to a railroad accident? This is the new proposed building that's right off 112th and Highway 2. Another issue is the traffic. It's estimated that there's going to be approximately 60,000 truck trips for these two wells. Due to the operations being in a residential area, traffic will be greatly impacted. Peoria is a 2-lane road. According to the response that the city provided COGCC, Petro wants to build a road off of 112th. Off of Peoria. I don't know how they're going to do that, but that was one of their proposals. Even if they put a light at Peoria and 104th, traffic will still be impacted. 104th is a 4-lane road, and it's not built to handle the amount of truck traffic that we're going to be looking at. Highway 2 is also 4 lanes. It was just widened and still unable to handle the traffic that has to use it now. The railroad tracks are still an issue. The train will run regardless of the decisions that you guys make. Coal trains are very long and sometimes stop, causing traffic disruptions, as everyone in this area knows. How is this going to impact the extra 60,000 truck trips that we're looking at?
I hate to have to stop you there, but your group is now out of time. For the allotted amount of time, we're going to go into questions from the city council to the citizen group.
Can I add one thing?
What's
like
that?
in the grand scheme of things, it's horrible the way the citizens that live here are pitted against each other. And it's horrible to see the comments that people are making to each other on all these different websites, Facebook, next door neighbor, whatever. In the light of trying to alleviate that, all we're asking for is transparency. Like if these guys are talking about, well, we should maybe meet on our own, it has to be a collective. It has to be all of us. We all have to be involved, because I didn't even get to read everything. I've got a 5-year-old, and I can't afford for her to be exposed to anything that's going to cause her issues down the road. We're over a barrel. We can't just sell our house because Big Oil wants to move in. That's not something that we can do here.
Thank you. All right, back to the council. Do you have any questions for the residents? Mr. Huseman.
Great. I have some questions directed to the residents and then also to another speaker that was discussing benzene. But I'd like to start with how many of the people in the audience walked to the Civic Center tonight? Anybody ride a bicycle? Horse and buggy? Okay, so most everybody got here via automotives, right? Okay. How many people that drove in a car brought somebody who wasn't an immediate family member with them and carpooled? The industry did. Okay. At the time everybody purchased your home, how many of you knew you were purchasing a home on an active oil field?
Are you asking questions?
I am. I'm asking
for answers,
questions.
or
Yes.
are you asking rhetorical questions?
No, I'm asking questions for answers, but if somebody would like to answer them. No? Okay.
I asked at the time of closing, and I was told I didn't own my mineral rights or my water rights, and that was incorrect. The title company gave me incorrect information. At the time I bought the house, I went to great lengths to find out about fracking. It was coming from another continent, and I was very, very concerned about how that might be handled. But I was told that the technology, I was told this by an Adams County representative. Technology was too old, it was too costly, and the state would no longer impose that, and they certainly wouldn't do it in a residential area. I bought my house based on that.
Okay.
There were other things. When I also went to Adams County, I backed to that open space. I was told that that open space would be an open space for 100 years. I pulled the plats to make sure that I wasn't just getting real estate rented. So I feel like I did all the due diligence I could possibly do before I bought that house. And this came up. I had to go back to 2 title companies to get research to find out that indeed I did own the mineral rights for the house. So I think I did do my due diligence, and I think a lot of people have done their due diligence. I mean, lots of things have happened in the 12 years I've lived here. It's just unbelievable to me that we put this meeting on all these months and industry is not here to really talk to us. And when you ask, how did I get here tonight? I deliberately planned my day so I'd be a mile and a half from this facility. I drove a car that gets 30 miles to the gallon. I do that deliberately. I make all kinds of efforts. When I lived in my house up in Commerce City, I put 50-year shingles that were low E on my roof. That cost me a tremendous amount of money when we did that. I put extra insulation in the roof. When we tore things down in that house, we added more. I insulated the garage. We did all kinds of things. I had a 15-SEER air conditioning unit put in there. So when you say, how did you get here tonight? Well, of course we're using gas power. Not all of us can afford an electric car. Are we watching it so that when the prices drop, we definitely will? But there are some complications with just turning that right now. But I'll be the first one to own one. I won't buy a car that doesn't get at least 30 miles to the gallon. And I'm very frugal about my driving and planning my time. I mean, it's just unbelievable you would even ask us that. We have worked very hard on this topic from every single angle. And we haven't gotten a fair share. We really have not. The idea that the city has had staff meeting with gas and oil, and we've had to go back to week to find that out. I initially started calling Extraction and trying to get information, and they would send me PowerPoints, or they would send me these little videos, and they would explain to me that I really didn't know that much. I'm a hazardous materials specialist. When they say there is no level of benzene that is acceptable, I'd like you all to really hear about that. Well, I work at the airport. 13% of all concrete in a commercial setting at the airport fails. And when she brought her little visual aids up there, and they're going to be filled with concrete, remember, 13% of that has the possibility of failing. And it's going to be under a house. And according to Geico Insurance, if you do not report that this horizontal drilling is happening, that's fraud. That's fraud. They consider that fraud. So if you file a claim because you have foundation problems or water in your basement, or you've got a roof problem, you could be accused of fraud for not telling them about the drilling, but all your insurance simply goes away.
And that's been found by a lot of people. And we did the research on that too.
Well, when I use Google Earth for my work and I look at the historical images and I go back to 2002, 2003, I see oil wells in the vicinity of our neighborhood.
Not in your backyard. You did not drive past them. You did not drive past them.
I need to ask everybody.
Those wells from the past were pump jacks, and you can see them on Tower Road.
You're right,
They
okay.
are not mega pads, Counselor,
You're
with
excuse me.
fracking running through them.
Hang on
That's
one
completely
second.
different.
I need to get the council members to ask a question. They need to specify to whom, have the answer to that question so that I don't have everybody trying to answer the question over the top of each other. Mr. Huseman, you have the floor. Would you please, when you're finished, I will go to the next council member.
So the pump jacks were there. The pump jacks were there when you purchased your home. Is that correct? No. The pump jack on 112th Avenue was not there when you purchased your home? The pump jack off Tower Road was not there when you purchased your home?
Yes, that appeared in the night. My husband was working for RTD and coming home at 11 o'clock. He woke me up and said, what is all that light out there? And the next morning, when I left to go to the airport at 5 in the morning, it was
And 112th approximately in Tower Road, that pump jack wasn't there in 2003, 2004, prior to anybody building a home in that area? Yes, go ahead.
How is that relevant whenever you're looking at 13 megapads? If we moved in and maybe we saw one pump jack when we contracted to build our house. I work in Longmont. I drive through Weld County. I have to drive because we drive a used car. We cannot afford an electric vehicle, and there have been a lot of lobbying tactics on part of oil and gas industry to prevent renewables from being affordable. So that's not a fair question either. And whenever you say, did you not see a pump jack? I didn't see a giant megapad out my backyard, and if we had, we would not have bought here.
So whether it was a pump jack or a mega pad, it is still on an active oil field. Is that not correct?
I don't understand how saying that's still on an active oil field implies that I should know that you're going to drop 13 megapads around my house.
So they have put a pump jack out there. You came along 10 years later and purchased a home and thought, they're never going to want to get more oil out of this ground. That one pump jack is the only pump jack that I'm going to have to contend with in my life.
I'm a grant writer for a nonprofit. It's not my job to speculate on what the oil and gas industry is going to do.
Okay, did you do the research prior to purchasing your home?
We researched Commerce City. We saw it was an up-and-coming neighborhood that looked desirable for families like ours, and we were excited to buy here. And even this conversation right now is making me regret that decision.
I'm sorry to hear that. The question to the benzene in the Journal for Nutrition states that only 50% of inhaled benzene is actually absorbed by the body, whereas 100% of absorbed benzene is absorbed by the body, ingested, 100% of ingested benzene is absorbed by the body. So my question is, if benzene is in our food, and benzene is being absorbed on a daily basis by the foods and the drinks that we purchase out of the grocery store, how can we criticize the emission of benzene and blame that solely for the increase in cancer when people are being exposed to benzene on a daily basis through the foods that they eat and drink?
Thank you, Mr. Huseman, for asking that question. Dr. Lisa McKenzie has offered to come and speak to this council as part of your speaker series. She, of course, is quite well known for her research in this arena with the Colorado School of Public Health, and I think she would be the best person to answer your question, and I'm glad that you raised it so that she can come and speak in the future.
Thank you. To the staff, there was a comment by the NRCC that pipelines are being proposed and that conversation has taken place with city staff regarding that. I have two questions. One, what conversations have taken place? Two, has any of that information been shared to anybody on the council?
Right now, currently, I'm actually going to give a presentation following this regarding just an update about what staff's been doing. Staff is currently talking with as many folks as we can from other jurisdictions, from other stakeholders such as fire districts, emergency managers, Adams County, and we are attempting to put together a list of best management practices, safeguards that we could put in place that would to the utmost possible protect our residents that we have. And we are certainly evaluating pipelines. When we met with Adams County, they recently passed an impact fee that incentivizes pipelines. And their news to us was that is the best tool to reduce trucks and reduce the number of tanks on the site. So we certainly are looking at the opportunity of or evaluating pipelines and to know if that would be something that would be offer more protections to Commerce City residents.
So you have had conversations with Mr. Martinelli regarding the installation of pipelines within the city?
Mr. Martinelli, the city planner?
I'm just going off of a name.
Yeah, he's here.
Okay.
He works in my department.
Okay.
He's a part of our team that has been talking with other stakeholders, with the industry, et cetera.
My second question on that, has any of that information regarding pipelines been shared with the members of this council?
No, specifically about that pipeline, no.
Thank you. Great. And the last thing I'm going to close out with, I do think that it's ironic that we have heard somebody say that we shouldn't be talking and disparaging each other whenever it's all around. It's on both sides. It's not just on one side. And, comments as far as spineless and things like that. So, I think that if we all want to be professionals, then we all need to hold each other to the same standard that we expect of everybody else. Thank you.
Councilwoman Elliott.
Thank you. So I've waited patiently watching this unravel in a very terrible way, and I think we needed to get a hold of this before this meeting got to this point. Respectively, Councilmember Huseman, asking questions to our audience, we're trying not to make this any more negative than it already is. And so when you have a question, I think it's just a matter of asking specific questions. I don't like how, I don't like how this has turned out because we are pitting each other against one another. I mean, we're trying to get sound information from both sides to make sound decisions, as I said before. So respectively, we're all held accountable, and I realize you two are talking amongst yourselves while I'm making a comment. I just want to be respectful of everybody's time, everybody's information. At one point, we said we weren't going to allow questions and answers, and now we're probably 15 minutes past of what we said we were going to do. So I just think we need to get back on track, and please, let's just try to make sound decisions with everything made available to us. And in addition, what my previous request was to have those industries available for additional information as well.
Mr. Guardiola.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions for the group that just presented. Are you guys going to like the CDP or CDHP and the state meetings also to raise these concerns? Because this is good stuff, but are you guys going to those too? Anybody could answer it from the group. Or you are?
I have testified at COGCC meetings.
Perfect.
Last week, I attended the local government designee training given by the COGCC, and they made a really important point, which was that in 2008, 1% of their permits in Colorado were for horizontally drilled wells. In 2018, that figure is 75%. So whatever was occurring prior to 2008 was simply not possible because the engineering and the invention hadn't even been invented yet. So we're just now catching up. Okay. And like you, we're trying to catch up. This only happened in April. It caught everyone by surprise, and that certainly applies to your staff as well.
Definitely.
I think we've tried all along the way to not rush the process, and that's what we're looking at now, is to look at it as thoroughly as possible. I do have Amanda Boldeno had remarks that she wanted to give, and Ryan Mata is going to give our conclusion and what we would like to ask. I would like to give them that opportunity if possible.
I have another follow-up for you. Where this is great information and it's very concerning, but my concern is that being a resident since 1983 and having Suncor in the core city, also Commerce City, not Reunion, Bell Creek, but Commerce City. So we have to make decisions for all of Commerce City, not just Buffalo Mesa, Reunion, Bell Creek, where I live. I have a hard time thinking that we're just concentrating on the north. And that's where my residence is, right? But as a councilman at large, I hope you guys see that it's a bigger picture than just the northern range. And I hope, when you guys are talking to us, that we do some more research to involve all of Commerce City, because Suncor is a staple in our community. And it's kind of like when I'm listening to this is some bad stuff going on, whatever. And then I'm thinking, I grew up about 4 blocks away from Suncor. So I want you guys to really think that it's not just Reunion, and when you come up here and always say Reunion, Reunion, I live in Bell Creek, but I'm from Commerce City, right? And I represent all of Commerce City, even the Reunion folks. So just take that into consideration, because it's a bigger issue, I think, and it's a hard issue. It's a really hard issue, because we also do get hit with people that work in the industry from Commerce City. Those are our residents too, that we have to work with and protect. So that's just but thank you guys for presenting on both sides.
All right, is there another council member that would like to speak? No? Mr. Douglas.
You had a question, Susan, on the filming. Was that done in the daytime or was that done at night?
Would you say that again, please?
On the film that showed the missions, that was done at night or in the daytime? The video you showed beginning of the
footage, the FLIR footage, that was done during the day.
Okay.
We went to 2 other sites also in Adams County, and also did FLIR footage at tank batteries. And there are tank batteries that should be of concern to Commerce City as well that are spotted throughout here.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Mr. Davis.
This is for Ms. Susan Noble. Getting back to the FLIR video, I work in that industry with that type of technology. I didn't see any time and date stamps on that video. I come from a a company where I go into court every day and the judge tells me, if there's no time and date stamp on there, Mr. Davis, please take your video and go home. I'm not saying that that wasn't on that date. I would just, and maybe I missed it in the first. And that's just one concern I had. More importantly, do you have any data that shows what that video is, any comprehensive air quality testing, or what I'm looking at? Because I can take a video of a car idling with a FLIR video, and it just looks absolutely terrible when the data actually shows that it's less than it was. I'm not saying this was or wasn't, but do you have any data that can show me what I'm seeing besides just the visual?
The process is that Earthworks makes a complaint to the COGCC. COGCC makes a determination, but they also send it on to the CDPHE. So you may receive an explanation later from the next presentation regarding what they would do with that kind of footage.
From that particular footage on that particular day?
Well, all
at that location?
All four were reported that day.
Okay.
All four have been reported.
Okay.
They weren't reported on that day, but all four have been reported.
Thank you.
It was an Earthworks team and 2 residents of Commerce City.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the council? Seeing none, I want to thank both the industry and the folks from the northern range of Commerce City. And as most of you may have noticed, I didn't ask a lot of questions. I'm here representing the residents of Commerce City. It's my job. It's what I was elected to do. But I'm also representing all of the residents. So some of the things that I heard from questions, I didn't necessarily agree with. But it's important for you to know that all of us live in this community as well. I have a 1.5-year-old granddaughter that lives with me, and I would never want anything bad to happen to any of my kids, my grandkids, or any of your kids. I also know, and it's important for all of you to understand, that there are certain things that the state controls that this municipal government does not control. And so we have to balance these decisions very lightly on what happens, because there's a thing called preemption by the state of Colorado. That means that the state law is that anything downhole, any operations that are below the surface are controlled by the state of Colorado. And we do not have the authority to interrupt the downhole operations. We have seen in the past several municipalities in the state have done moratoriums. Several of the municipalities in the state that have done moratoriums have been sued for doing those moratoriums. I know there is a major ballot issue, and I know everybody sitting in this audience is watching that measure that's coming up in November. I believe it's 110. Was 97? 112, thank you. Was 97 is 112. And so I know there's different opinions in this room of what should happen and what shouldn't happen. I think in November we're going to see a serious identification of what the residents of Colorado want or don't want. And we're not the ones in charge of that. We have our votes, and that's 9 votes up here. However, we're going to hear loud and clear by the residents of Colorado in November on setback issues. There are several legislative items that are going to be before the residents in November. Some of them that would make cities responsible for right-of-ways and public takings that would benefit oil and gas industry. 112, which would put setbacks and harm the industry. There's a lot of those things that each individual is going to have to factor in. But I think what's important for me to explain is what we have the authority to do and not do. One of the things that you have noticed is in that presentation, we have done an extraction agreement process back in 2012 that requires every operator to come before the city, and based on location can be required on the surface to do additional air monitoring, additional noise monitoring. We can charge impact fees for traffic and extra trucks and damage to our infrastructure and things like that. But we're limited on what we can do. It's a great thing that you go down and speak at the state. The state controls that downhill activity. Now, we're trying to do our best to be open to our residents, open to the industry, and take this information in so that we can make a qualified decision on what needs to happen when it comes before us. So I know that I've heard from both sides, yes, we would like to see extraction, some of these operators come in here and speak with our residents. I think for my opinion of how this meeting went tonight, I want to thank everybody in the audience because it was very controlled, everybody was respectful. There's a lot of different opinions in here, and there's 9 of us up here that are trying to do the right thing by the residents of Commerce City within our legal authority. So, first and foremost, thank you to every one of you for coming in tonight. Thank you to all the speakers because I gained information from every single speaker that got up and spoke about what my decisions will entail. So that is very much appreciative. And with that, I want to close my comments. I want to allow Brian to have a comment.
We do have CDPHE
Yep.
here to present. Just want to make sure you saw that.
Yep, and that's what I was getting ready to do. I want to turn it over to CDHPE to give their presentation. So if the representative from Colorado Health and Department of Public Safety will come forward and get started.
Thanks for having me this evening. Thanks everyone who spoke previously. I just wanted to echo Mayor Ford's sentiment that I appreciate, the civility that I think people brought with them today. So I hope we can keep that spirit in mind as we go forward to a pretty contentious election season. So real quick, just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Sean Hackett. I'm new to the position as Oil and Gas Liaison with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And today I want to talk about certain COGCC rules. So just to be clear, those are 2 acronyms I'll be throwing around. COGCC, that's a separate agency than ours. That's the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And then CDPHE, that's us. That's the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And we are 2 separate agencies who share oversight over the industry in some ways. So I'll talk about rules of COGCCs that we have a consultation role in, environmental review consultation role in. I'll also talk about CDPHE's specific rules governing the industry. And I also just briefly wanted to highlight for you another program within CDPHE that's not regulatory. It's called the Oil and Gas Health Information Response Program, where citizens can report health concerns to us and look for information that group puts out. So looking at COGCC's rules, oil and gas drilling in this state is primarily regulated through the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Control Act with rules and regulations promulgated by COGCC. So again, CDPHE has a somewhat limited role in regulating the industry, and I'll talk about kind of how that works. So real quick, COGCC, they were here previously. I hope that was a useful and informative conversation that they had with you. They issue permits on things like the drilling and operation of oil and gas wells. They enforce rules and regulation regarding things like well spacing, well bore construction, and site reclamation. So I understand there's several spacing applications within your community from Great Western and Extraction. Those are being reviewed, and the ultimate decision on those will be within COGCC's wheelhouse. But as part of a 2008 rulemaking, the CDPHE was given a consultation role on a limited set of rules and regulations of COGCC that touch upon public health, safety, and the environment. I've highlighted those rules right here on this slide. As you can see, they cover things like oil, like dust and odors, stormwater management, and those types of issues. So there's several ways where the consultations can be triggered. The first one is the one that I wanted to highlight for this group because I think it's the most relevant to the work that you all do. The bottom 3 little bullets there, those are Those are all scenarios that would automatically trigger an environmental consultation from my office. But the first one there I think is important for this group to know about, and that's where the local government designee or the official who's designated by COGCC to be the main point of contact on oil and gas matters, if they get a drilling permit within their jurisdiction, so that's a Form 2, a COGCC Form 2 drilling permit, or a COGCC Form 2A oil and gas location assessment, if they receive that drilling permit within their jurisdiction, then they can request an environmental consultation from my office, and that's how we would become engaged and involved in that process. And how that process works is we have 40 days to consult once a request to us is made. That request period or that consultation period can be condensed a little bit if the locality takes the full 14 days that they have to review the permit before they can request it to us. So it can be condensed down to 26 days. Obviously, the sooner you all are able to get that information to us, the more robust and thoughtful our reviews will be. And those reviews are designed to mitigate the impacts of the oil and gas development. And what we do is we would review the proposed project, we'd visit the site, consult with the operator, consult with the localities and any potentially concerned citizens, and we might make recommendation on things like additional monitoring requirements and those sorts of things. And our recommendations are designed to minimize impacts on public health and environment. COGCC then ultimately has the authority to whether or not to adopt or not adopt any of the recommendations that we make. But pursuant to their rules, that recommendation has to be it has to be designed to minimize significant adverse impacts on the environment, consistent with their other statutory obligations. And there's actually a guidance document online that's available that kind of describes this consultation process in a little bit more detail. So in addition to that consultation role that we have over COGCC rules, a couple of divisions, several divisions within CDPHE play an important role in regulating the agency or regulating the oil and gas industry, and they have their own rules and regulations that they enforce, so I'd like to cover those today. They cover things like certain discharges of pollution to water bodies of the state, also cover solid and hazardous waste management, and the pollution of, or the emission of different types of air pollutants or compounds. So moving on to state waters, the Water Quality Control Act was amended to outline the roles and responsibilities of COGCC and CDPHE with respect to water quality standards and impacts of the oil and gas industry. So the Water Quality Control Commission, which is within CDPHE, they're solely responsible for adopting water quality standards and classifications for the state. And COGCC, in turn, is responsible for implementing the groundwater, so downhole water quality standards. And so as part of that authority, one of the speakers touched on today, there's a requirement for groundwater monitoring both before and after a well is drilled. And Colorado was the first state in the nation to do this requirement for both before and after drilling. And as far as I'm aware, remains one of the few states that does so to this day. And both divisions, both my agency, CDPHE, and COGCC, share responsibilities for spills or releases to surface waters of the state, and that's outlined in a memorandum of agreement between our agencies that was entered into back in the year 2000. So stormwater management, that's another area where our agencies share oversight. There's some overlap there, and our overlaps managed through interagency communication and consultation. So our rules are designed to complement one another, and I won't go too much into detail with that, but one hook that CDPHE has in this is that if there's an oil and gas operation that is potentially going to disturb 1 acre or more, then they'd be required to get a stormwater permit from our Water Quality Control Division, and that's just one of the opportunities for citizens and for public officials to get involved in the public comment and participation process. COGCC, in turn, has rules in place to ensure that site erosion is minimized, groundwater and wildlife are protected, and that the site can be properly reclaimed. So regulation of hazardous and solid waste management, the exploration and production, or EMP, it shows up in this slide, of oil and gas can produce a variety of different wastes that might be subject to either COGCC or CDPHE regulations. The types of different wastes that might be encountered would be things like drill cuttings, produced water, drilling mud, flowback, or spent fracking fluid. And how it works in Colorado, and this is consistent with federal requirements, is that CDPHE is responsible for regulating commercial facilities, so facilities that are charging for accepting this exploration and production waste. They would be overseen by CDPHE. Non-commercial waste management facilities, on the other hand, are overseen by COGCC. So now taking a quick look at the regulation of air quality, oil and gas facilities are in fact industrial facilities that may be subject to different air permitting requirements and regulations if they emit pollutants above certain levels. So what the Air Pollution Control Division does, they develop air quality regulations, issue permits, implement the air quality program, the system of air monitoring networks throughout the state. They conduct inspections and enforce air quality regulations. They have 60 monitors all throughout the state of Colorado to identify air quality issues and emerging trends. So here is a list of different Air Pollution Control Division regulations that would apply to the industry. And there's one there that I want to bring your attention to. Regulation number 7, that's Colorado was the first state in the nation to directly regulate methane emissions from the oil and gas industry. And it definitely serves as a model across the nation today. A lot of states are looking to us and see what we're doing there. Just a real quick overview of what that's like are storage tanks that have the potential to emit 6 tons per year or more of methane are required to install emission control devices that are capable of reducing emissions by 98%. And just to provide a little bit of scale on that, it does apply to a broad swath of different oil and gas industries. That 6 ton per year threshold, that's approximately the same amount that your typical corner gas station might emit. So that's just a little idea of the scale there. So among other things, our regulations include a comprehensive leak detection and repair program, and it requires frequent monitoring using EPA-approved methods like the infrared camera we saw a presentation on today. The most recent report on this leak detection and repair program, I think, is a pretty good success story for that department. It was just recently released, I think, in the last week or two, and that demonstrated that there was a drop in leaks, a 52% drop in leaks from 2015 to 2017. This slide, I won't go into too much detail about air permitting, or give you an air permitting 101. Just wanted to kind of highlight that this is another opportunity for the public to get involved in the comment process. When the Air Division is considering a permit application from oil and gas company, there's an opportunity for public commenting there. Ozone non-attainment, I don't know that I need to spend too much time on this, but many of you know that Colorado meets all federal air quality standards with the exception of the Denver Metro North Front Range area, which is not attaining the federal ozone or smog standard. So that division's working on opportunities to try and reduce those emissions that contribute to ozone, and those pollutants that contribute to ozone or smog formation are VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and NOx, nitrogen oxides. So I think it's important to note that although we're not attaining the federal air quality standard, monitored ozone values have gone down pretty consistently over the years, and this has occurred in spite of a large influx of population to the state and a huge increase in vehicle miles traveled. So there's some positive news in that to be had. Just wanted to highlight this webpage for you. This is another program within the Air Division. The Technical Service Program, it provides a lot of useful tools for the public that I recommend everyone take a look at. They have real-time data to outline some of the air quality monitors throughout the state. They also have action alerts, and so you can see whether or not it's a high pollution day and try and make any changes in your lifestyle that day to do what you can to reduce emissions, or if you're a sensitive population, to do things that you can to protect yourself from any harmful air scenarios. So now that I've really briefly highlighted the regulatory oversight that CDPHE has over the industry, I just real quickly wanted to highlight a different program, this non-regulatory program within CDPHE that responds to citizen health concerns. That's the Oil and Gas Health Information and Response Program. So as many of us are aware, I guess painfully aware in some of these communities up here, is Colorado's population has boomed pretty significantly over the last several years. And at the same time, technological advances in directional drilling and hydraulic fracturing or fracking have made a lot of these previously uneconomic resources more economic to develop. So in order to address the concern or the controversy that arose with that, Governor Hickenlooper convened a task force back in 2014, which made several recommendations, one of which led to the creation of this program. It's a collaboration between two different units within CDPHE. It consists of a health concern investigator. There are toxicologists on staff. We have a consulting physician, and we work really closely with air quality scientists. Real briefly, what it does is that program tracks and investigates citizen health concerns and has an information clearinghouse, which I think has a lot of useful information that the public can access online. So looking now kind of at the investigation process, the results, it all starts when citizens report health complaints to us. So we're kind of responding to the symptoms or the health concerns that citizens report to that program. They can do it online or calling that number listed on the screen there. The program then coordinates with multiple different stakeholders to try and identify what potentially might be the cause of the health symptom that's being reported. One thing that the program does in response to those complaints is they'll conduct an initial air quality monitoring or initial air quality screening that just consists of a really short, quick snapshot air quality sample. And depending on what the results are of that, or if they receive a cluster of complaints, or if there are more severe complaints in nature, then they have a mobile laboratory that they send out to different facilities throughout the state. And they assess these monitored air quality values against standard risk assessment toxicology values. All that information is captured in a written report, which is published online. And so since the program was launched in October of 2015, it's received nearly 600 complaints so far. Most of the complaints, not surprisingly, have been coming from communities where oil and gas development is more widespread and where the residential populations are more dense than other parts of the state. The types of, most of the complaints that program has received have been associated with odors, and the types of symptoms that people report have included things like eye, nose, and throat irritation, dizziness, and nosebleeds. So in addition to forwarding a number of different complaints to COGCC, this program has conducted its own investigations where they've sent out that mobile monitoring laboratory to do comprehensive air sampling. And they've also considered a whole bunch of different other available air quality monitoring data that's out there. So those samples, I think it's important to note, they were collected at times when people were experiencing the health symptoms and from locations that are representative of the emissions that they might potentially be exposed to. So what I'm getting at is they've been collected at distances of 500 feet or greater because that is currently the state setback requirement. So based on what this program has found, and based on the currently available air monitoring data and standardized health risk assessment methods, those investigations have determined that the risk of harmful health effects has been low for residents living near oil and gas operations. And so while this doesn't necessarily mean issue resolved, pencils down, our job is done, really what that means is additional air quality monitoring and health risk assessment is necessary in order to fully comprehend any potential impacts or community level impacts. So to that end, this program is currently going through a peer review process to follow up on and kind of update or submit an additional report that follows up on a report that was touched on today. I expect that this report will make it through the peer review process sometime this fall. Unfortunately, I don't have any specifics on when that might be publicly available, but that will be posted online as soon as it is available. And one thing that I kind of wanted to highlight on this, just because it was discussed by some of the presenters, there is the McKinsey study, and this program has put out a statement on that, so I wanted to just kind of refer everyone to that and just sort of go over some of the points that were made in that statement. So first of all, that study used similar methods to what this program used in the 2017 report we put out, but there are two main differences that I think are pretty important to note. So that study, McKinsey's study, considered data from distances closer than 500 feet, where this program, CDPHE, looked at distances of 500 feet or greater. Another key difference with that study is that they used California EPA risk assessment methods, while that 2017 report we put out was based on federal U.S. EPA risk assessment methods. And one thing that study does is it confirms it confirmed the 2017 findings of a low risk of cancer and non-cancer health effects at distances of 500 feet and greater. It only found increased risk of cancer at distances closer than 500 feet, and it underscored the importance of establishing setbacks. So again, this is something that the study that's currently undergoing peer review, we're hoping will kind of help resolve some of those lingering questions that the McKenzie study has raised. So really that's all I was planning on talking about today. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you all have.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Hackett? Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Hackett, for coming down and doing a presentation. I noticed that these reports, as far as any kind of air emissions, all that have been leaked or detected, it's only done by self-reporting, correct? Or from the like a residential area?
So the leak detection and repair reports that are summarized in an annual report, that is self-reporting, but the investigations that this Oil and Gas Health Information Response Program does, those are based on their own air quality data that they're collecting themselves, in addition to a variety of different sets of data that are captured by entities like CSU and that sort of thing.
Okay. I looked on your monitoring stations, and looking at the dot that represents the monitoring station, I only see 13 monitoring stations. Is that true?
That's not true. There are 60 throughout the state. I'm not sure why that's not reflected on that map.
It doesn't give a number. I'm just counting them based on the what it shows to indicate where these stations are. So when they when the industry comes in and does drilling, are they required to put up air monitors?
Not pursuant to any specific rule that we have on the books, but they do. I know that they do wear portable four-way gas monitors to make sure that their workers aren't exposed to any toxic or hazardous levels of substances in the air. So they do that. I think maybe that's an OSHA requirement. I know that they also put monitors on their facilities. Some of the newer facilities have monitors that can capture in real time any emissions or leaks that are coming off the site. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking specifically of one over in Erie near the landfill over there. That one has a technology in place to automatically shut down the site if it catches any fugitive emissions. But again, that is a newer facility.
Now, was that put in request by the residents, or was that put in as upon completion of the drilling?
That was not, my understanding, it's not due to a resident's request. From what I understand, that's more of a business practice. They don't want to lose the product that they're trying to sell, so they're trying to capture that.
Okay. And then you indicated that there was a response as far as level of benzene and other chemicals within 500 feet of a person in that area. Is that based on the number of occupants in that area, or is that like, maybe a well has been by a farmhouse or so? Because it seemed like when these types of industry are placed within residential neighborhoods, you're going to have more of reporting because it's a concentration level. And then people being around there, it depends on which way the wind blows, they're going to take in those VOCs.
So your question is, does the study account for the larger populations versus smaller populations?
Yeah.
I mean, it uses the same standardized risk assessment method that applies regardless of how many people live in the area. That, as far as I know, those risk assessment values that are established by federal agencies like OSHA or the Department of Energy or EPA or state level toxicology values, those are standardized. They don't differ depending on whether or not there's 100 people nearby or one person nearby.
Okay. Are you guys a separate entity, or you're on the side of with KOGA? How do you guys differentiate yourself from the industry and being independent?
We're not even closely related. I mean, KOGA is a trade industry representative, or a trade industry that represents oil and gas companies. We're the State Department of Public Health and Environment that has a mission to protect public health and environment. And part of what we do to that end is issue permits to regulate the industry. And that's all laid out in statute and existing regulations.
Okay, just wanted to clear that up. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council?
And I just kind of wanted to make very clear, I don't know if I made it clear enough in my presentation, but that consultation process really is a good opportunity for you all, for your community, for your staff to get involved and to engage my office and to get these environmental reviews. If these Great Western and extraction drilling and spacing units are ultimately approved by COGCC, and if the operators go through and apply for a permit to drill, then that would be a good opportunity for you to try and engage us on that.
Councilman Teeter.
Thanks for the presentation. I just listened to you talk here. I have is there a study being done on the workers that are in the area, if their cancer levels are up or down?
I guess I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see how the workers are coming out of this.
I'm not sure what sort of occupational safety and health studies are being conducted currently, but these ones that I'm referring to are looking at community level health risks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. McBroom, we're going to go into reports.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Normally, we would do our monthly oil and gas update at the next regular city council meeting next week, but given tonight's agenda, it made sense to do our monthly update tonight. So for my report, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kramer to review our current monthly update.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is every month we provide an update primarily to inform council and the public of the updated permits activity that has come in. I'm going to provide a little bit more information about some of the work that staff has been doing this past month as well. And obviously that's what I just laid out there on that slide. This is a background slide that we include on all of our monthly updates. It's just a refresher about how we got here today. As has been mentioned numerous times tonight, there was a lot of activity in 2012 that resulted in new oil and gas regulations. Prior to that, the city had none. In 2018, there were multiple state applications for areas within Commerce City boundaries. But as of September, there are still no oil and gas permits, city oil and gas permit applications in. The operators, this is to clarify a little bit in reference to some of the comments made, especially by CDPHE, regarding the comment periods that are out there and our ability to request CDPHE involvement in those. The city, along with the operators who have submitted these applications, have requested from the COGCC that those comment periods be placed on hold and that the processing of those would be placed on hold with the opportunity for an additional, what amounts to a second comment period. Part of that is obviously so that we can better understand what kind of best management practices we would like to request be put on any state permits. And as a result, we're certainly hopeful to engage the CDPHE in that process. And as we go through those what permits those might be at the state, the city was not made aware of any new spacing applications in the last month since our last presentation. There was one new combo for a series of 32 wells, the Oriole and Hawk Form 2 applications. As a reminder, the Form 2 are the individual wells that go down into the ground. And then the accompanying Form 2A, which is the actual surface location, there was one new application since our last presentation for the Harlow site. And I will just show you those on this map. So everything else that you see with all the other colors and all the other green dots for the 2As you've seen before, the new one is the Harlow pad, just on the other side of 76, to the east of 76, to the west of State Highway 2, just north of the alignment of what would be 112th if it extended that far. The spacing, or the twos that go from there, go to the north, I believe that's Oriole, and to the south, which I believe is Hawk. So that is the new state activity that we have received in the last month. There are a few other updates, though, I would like to provide City Council. We have been, at Council's direction, we have been meeting with the operators to try and better understand their processes, what they intend to do, what they're applying for. No agreements are in place or anything along those lines. We have been meeting more with Extraction than the other operators. Those have been a little bit more intermittent. And our best guess today of what would be the first product of those meetings would be the comment letters that we would send to the state regarding those Form 2As that are out there when they basically release that second round of comments. Staff's also been really drinking from a fire hose, to use the expression, about trying to get up to speed about everything that comes into play on this issue. We've been meeting with the Adams County staff regarding their efforts to ensure that we are better coordinating. That leads to conversations that Adams County is central in about coordinating fire and emergency managers so that we can require emergency response plans. Oftentimes those are going to go above and beyond state requirements. We've been meeting, well, we've met once with Broomfield staff. They've gone through an agreement process, and we've tried to understand and learn from them about what worked well and what other lessons they've learned through their process. Met with the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge staff regarding the interface of oil and gas outside of the refuge, what that might mean for their operations on the refuge. They are scheduled to speak as a part of the speaker series in October. So you'll be hearing from them next month. We also been meeting with South Adams County Water and Sanitation District staff about water quality issues. They are speaking on September 24th. It's not exclusively about oil and gas, although I'm sure that will be a part of it. They are coming to speak about water quality issues more generically or more broadly, I would say. A lot of this is leading towards a topic that has come up a few times tonight, which is staff's undertaking to try and formulate what is called the best management practices. Those types of efforts that and requirements that we're hoping to put into agreements that are required by our code that go above and beyond state requirements that operators would agree to that would help protect our residents. And it's going to be on a variety of topics: air quality, water quality, reducing noise, reducing tanks where possible, limiting truck traffic, coordinating emergency response. We're still in the process of learning, exploring, formulating those. This is where we might talk about pipelines, for example. I wouldn't say that we've got to a point where we are fully prepared to lay out what that is. We're still learning. We're still trying to understand. We're still trying to talk to as many agencies as possible to really formulate the best management practices that will be the best for Commerce City. Specifically within that, one area that the mayor mentioned earlier tonight that our code allows for is the implementation of a traffic impact fee. And the city has contracted with a consultant to identify the impacts of oil and gas operations on the city's infrastructure, specifically its roadway system, and make recommendations regarding the adoption of an impact fee if that's necessary, if that study proves that that's necessary. We've obviously been talking about that issue with Adams County because they also just passed a traffic impact fee related to oil and gas industry. It's interesting, when we talked with them, they specifically formulated an approach that incentivizes pipelines in an effort to reduce truck traffic, tanks on the site, et cetera. I'm not sure what ours will be yet, but that process is underway. That would obviously be brought forward to City Council for consideration. That has to be adopted through a City Council process. We're also looking at updating our ordinance related to oil and gas. And this might come in a few different phases. The more imminent, the more urgent set of updates that we might do would be to look at potentially preempted sections and correct those within our oil and gas section. The mayor mentioned earlier about those topics, those areas that are preempted and covered by the state. We obviously do not want to be in conflict with those, so that you can see some examples there of the types of things that would be on that more immediate list of things to address, clarifying vague terms, eliminating, for example, eliminating the appeals compliance section, restating permit requirements that are presently not real succinctly laid out. Any code requirement will require City Council approval as we move forward. And then I thought I was going before the speaker series, so pardon this slide. But staff is available to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Does anyone on council have any questions for the staff? Mr. Huseman?
Thank you, Mayor. Currently, what is the setback away from the Rocky Mountain Arsenal?
There's no code requirement as a setback for the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. When the template, the boilerplate, you can call it any number of things, when the staff put together a starting point for negotiations for the agreement that's required, there was a 1 mile setback put in that document, but that is not a code requirement. That's just in the boilerplate for the extraction agreement.
Okay. What is the current setback away from homes, businesses, schools, and the like?
Currently in the code, I believe it's 150, and so we have to actually, the state now has 500-foot setbacks, so we will be wanting to change that, obviously, to match the state. However, we certainly hope that through the extraction agreement process that we can put in setbacks that go even further than that.
Okay. I love the Arsenal. I love to go out there. I love taking pictures out there, but the idea that we would protect black-footed ferrets and bison and hawks and everything else living out there more than we would our residents is a little troubling to me. According to your presentation, looks like there's a lot of work needs to be done as far as tightening up our regulations on oil and gas. It's been 6 years since the oil and gas regulations were established. Purpose of this meeting was to discuss the impacts of a moratorium on oil and gas, and I would say based on the last presentation you just gave, given the fact that we have work that needs to be done, the fact that you want to create some BMPs, that we should put that moratorium back on the schedule for a vote to see whether or not this council wants to approve it.
All right. Any other questions for the staff? Mr. Teeter? No? All right. Anyone? All right. Thank you, Chris. All right, we'll go to the city attorney. Reports?
I have nothing to report this evening except the senior assistant city attorney, Rachel Allen, announced her resignation last week and is moving to the city of Aurora. It's a great opportunity. I'm mentioning that because we're on television right now, and if there are any attorneys in the city that happen to be watching that are interested in practicing municipal law, the position is posted on the city's website. Thank you.
Always trying to get some free advertising, aren't you, Robert? I can appreciate that. I do not have any reports tonight. Tonight is, again, has been a study session for informational purposes for this council. I want to thank all the residents and all of the folks from the industry and CDHPE that came in to help give us more information to make more refined quality decisions. So thank you all and have a great night tonight. We're adjourned.